is Liz Bramlett coming to you from our training center, and we're going to spend a few minutes learning how to calculate the maximum allowable rent for the tax credit program. What you'll learn if you're new to this program is how we calculate rent in this particular program for our tax credit units is very different than how you may be used to calculating a tenant's rent in, say, the Section 8 or public housing program. In the credit program, the maximum allowable rent, which we learn to calculate using a formula, is gross rent. It includes a utility allowance that's representative of the average monthly rent, average monthly cost for utilities paid directly by the residents, paid out of their own pockets. The residents get to keep a portion of the gross rent to put towards those utility bills. That's their utility allowance. And what's left over is the maximum what the owner charged them, tenant rent. Tenant is the maximum rent the owner can actually charge the resident. It is the gross rent we calculate by formula taking out the utility allowance. In this credit program, maximum rent is based on not the family size or the family's income, but the maximum rent is based on the unit size. So we calculate a maximum rent for our studios, a maximum one-bedroom rent, a maximum two-bedroom rent. And utilize the project's income limits to do this. We're told by the IRS that we are supposed to impute or pretend a household size of 1.5 persons per bedroom or person for a studio or efficiency apartment. And allowable rent is 30% of the project's income limit for that imputed or pretend household size. For a studio or an efficiency, you're going to pretend a household size of one person per bedroom. Maybe two people really live there, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about pretend household sizes solely for the purpose of picking the income limit to calculate maximum rent. For a bedroom, we say one bedroom times 1.5 persons equals 1.5 persons. The maximum rent is 30% of the project's income limit for 1.5 persons. And we create that income limit for 1.5 persons by averaging our one person and two person income limits. For a bedroom, we say 2 bedrooms times 1.5 persons is 3 persons. So the maximum allowable tax credit rent is 80% of the project's income limit for 3 persons. For a 3-bedroom, we say 3 bedrooms times 1.5 persons equals 4.5 persons. So the maximum allowable tax credit rent for a 3-bedroom apartment is 30% of the project's income limit for 4.5 persons. Create that income limit by averaging our 4-person and 5-person income limits. 4-bedroom, we say 4 times 1.5 persons equals 6 persons. So the maximum rent for a 4-bedroom tax credit unit is 2% of the project's income limit for 6 people. Committed to the 20 at 50 set aside, we're going to calculate the rent for a 1-bedroom unit that has a utility allowance of $60. One income limit is $22,700. 2-person income limit is $27,100. Create that income limit for 1.5 persons and do that by averaging our 1-person and 2-person income limits. 7 plus $27,100 equals $49,800. Divide that by 2, and the income limit for our project for 1.5 persons is $24,900. 30% of that is $74,770. That is our maximum annual rent for this unit, but we always need to talk in monthly amounts. By 12 months, round down to the nearest whole dollar, and our maximum possible rent is $622. I really do mean round down, because if you round up to $623, you'll be charging more on an annual basis than $74.70. You'll be found out of compliance for charging too much rent, and you lose your credits for that unit for that year. We know that the maximum we could charge for this unit is $622. That's what's the maximum possible. And then if the tenants weren't paying any of their own utilities, there was no utility allowance, we charge the tenant $622. But these tenants are paying some of their own utilities, and they have a $60 utility allowance, so we subtract that out, and the maximum we can actually charge the tenant is $562. Example, a 40 at 60 property need the rent for a 2-bedroom unit that has a $78 utility allowance. The 3-person income limit is $38,700. That income limit we use to calculate rent for 2-bedroom units. So $38,700 times 30% is a maximum annual rent of $11,610. The annual amount, again, we always need a monthly amount. So we did that by 12 months, round down to the nearest whole dollar, and the maximum possible monthly rent is $967. These tenants do pay some of their own utilities. They have a $70 utility allowance, which we subtract out, giving them a maximum tenant rent of $889. That receives Section 8 assistance or something comparable or like Section 8, and they pay rent according to the rules for their subsidy program. The owner receives for the unit the total rent to the owner, the contract rent, whichever terminology you are comfortable with, and the portion of that rent paid by the resident on their own behalf is determined by rules for the subsidy program. And gives us the opportunity to collect some extra rent. When you have a Section 8 tenant, the total you receive for the unit can exceed the maximum tax credit rent, and you can still get the tax credit for the unit. And it's also possible, if it's based on the rules for how the tenant rent is calculated in Section 8, the tenants can pay more than the maximum tax credit rent, so long as you continue to receive a rental subsidy payment on their behalf. Let me know if you have any questions about calculating your maximum tax credit rents or any other questions you think where I might be of help in affordable housing. My website here. You have office phone number and my email address. You can also follow me on Twitter and connect with me on LinkedIn. I look forward to talking with you in the future. Bye-bye.